Lovely. So just a very brief, Jannath has been a member of Engaging in Empowering School Libraries for the last year, but previous to that, she did join my masterclass, which is how I met her and how I think this is the project that she's talking about it came about. So over to you, Jannath.
Thank you very much. So a little bit of context before I start. I have been a librarian for 10 years. I started my graduate training at a sixth form, which is actually currently a link school to the secondary school that I currently work at. Now, at the sixth form, before I even knew about my current secondary school, there was a particular set of students who stuck out, and it wasn't for good reasons, unfortunately. And when it came about that I got the job at Connaught School for Girls, I had gone from a sixth form to an academic library, which was with Wellcome Trust. And then I had joined Connaught School for Girls. And I had just come from an academic library working with students who stuck out at my previous sixth form. And so I knew that the culture that was currently there, I really needed to get my hands dirty. um, and before I knew, before I started my MSc with Northumbria, there was terminology that I did not know, but I knew that I needed the students to really get themselves used to the idea of referencing and academic integrity and get themselves ready for college. And I knew what challenges were lying ahead. Um, so I had a lot of conversations with my line managers, and in actual fact, I didn't know what I was wanting to get out of them. So those conversations ended up being very mute. Um, and as of most recently, so it's been a year now, the line manager I had then had changed and became the head teacher, which was very, very helpful and useful to me. It was like wonderful timing because I had just introduced FOSIL. I found FOSIL through pure serendipity. It was almost like Google answered answered my calls. I was just typing furiously, and I found FOSIL, and I shared everything that I had, and it seemed quite overwhelming for both myself and my line manager. But once I got through all the forums and got myself used to the ideas and the terminologies, I felt finally, after years and years, I have a strategy. I just need to implement it. And there were many conversations had, but luckily and thankfully, my current head teacher was all for it. Um, and what it looked like was there was a literacy class that was happening in the library, which was actually timetabled under the English department. And the English department, they saw this as a chance for students to read in silence, to get the accelerated reader quizzes done. And I was sat in the library doing what I needed to do while this was happening, and I could tell straight away that this time could be used much more efficiently. So, um, these lessons happened with each form group, year 7, 8, and 9, key stage 3 classes, once every 2 weeks. And in order for me to actually pitch a true literacy curriculum, I felt the need to I needed training. I had no idea where to start, and that's where we go through the stages. Oh, there you go. Oops. So first, I needed to, with my head teacher, confirm my role, and that was very important for me because I didn't. I have been given feedback from line managers that I take too much on, and then I work myself to the bone, and I do uh, in lots of things at the same time, and I don't give it my all. And I really wanted to. I was very, very passionate about this particular project, so I confirmed that I am working with Key Stage 3. I will be taking over these particular lessons, and I will be planning the curriculum. Um, to add more context, I haven't currently enrolled. but I'm planning to, with my school, to take the assessment only route to becoming a qualified teacher. The reason why this really helps is because I had to look into the teaching standards, and in order to look into and by looking in the teaching standards, I knew what my expectations were. I had to get assessments done, I had to report, I had to be a part of parents' evenings, and this really changed the game for me. So Elizabeth, again, perfect timing, handed out an email regarding a masterclass, and I attended that masterclass, which really, really helped me establish the things that I needed to do and in the order that I needed to do it. And without that, I really wouldn't have been able to organize myself and get what I needed to get done. The masterclass was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was in April, May, and I needed to get a curriculum done for September, but it needed to be approved by July. So it was a lot of work done. So I went ahead, and the next stage was to create the curriculum, the curriculum aims, the curriculum intent, what I intended with it, and the modules that I'll be teaching. And then I went ahead and created the literacy criteria. The reason for this was because I knew what was expected of me as somebody who is hoping to become a teacher. I needed to know exactly what I was assessing, and I could not do that without having a criteria in front of me, and without the students knowing what they will be assessed on as well. And then finally, I went ahead and created the resources. Now I'll go through that step by step. Firstly, with the actual curriculum, I used the recommendations that were set out by Education Endowment Foundation, which is, or EEF for short, which is a independent charity aiming to bridge the gap between those with lower income and educational achievement. And this is the most recent recommendations that they published in regards to improving literacy. And I went through this, and it was very clear to me that there was a huge overlap between these recommendations and what was published through FOSIL and the cycle. And because up until this point, I was quite well versed in what FOSIL, the cycle, and the skills, I had poured myself into that beautiful Excel sheet done by Daryl. And I knew exactly what, as soon as I started reading it, exactly what skills I would be looking at. So I knew, again, I couldn't do it all. What we have here on the left is the actual recommendation by EEF. And what we have on the right is the breakdown or the bullet points that they had written down within this particular recommendation. And I had gone ahead and highlighted where FOSIL and literacy recommendations meet. And you can see here on the right, there are, for example, the activating prior knowledge, prediction, and questioning was just the icing on the cake for this particular recommendation. And I had gone ahead and started taking out things that I wanted to implement in my own curriculum. We have here breaking down complex writing tasks as another recommendation from EEF. I've highlighted here explicit instruction, planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And the reason I've done explicit instruction or highlighted it was because I wanted both staff who will be teaching this curriculum and the students to be well aware that what we are teaching is very relevant, and this is a particular skill that they're working on. And I think this would help also staff teaching the particular skill. We go ahead to the next recommendation, which was combine writing instruction with reading. And I've got here highlighted reading helps student gain knowledge, writing can deepen students' understanding. And what I started seeing here is the construct. And I saw a lot of overlap between this particular recommendation and the construct part of the cycle, FOSIL cycle. This is from a presentation that I shared with all staff. And what I went ahead and did was to really drill it in, is I then went ahead and did it the opposite direction. And I went through each cycle step by step, and I showed the very clear connection between this FOSIL cycle and the and how it connects to the EEF's recommendation. And the reason why I did this was because this was the first time staff members had ever heard of FOSIL, have ever heard part of the cycle. And I really, really wanted to take time to actually go through each cycle. And not so surprisingly, but amazingly, one of the cycle that most members of staff had something to say about was the wonder and investigate. And I think those two particular parts of the cycle was where a lot of members of staff had noted that they wanted that out of their own particular curriculums. They wanted this for their students, but they had no idea how to get there. And so we went ahead and went straight to creating the curriculum. And I went through with my staff the how we got to this particular curriculum. So these are the curriculum highlights. From looking and highlighting the EEF and seeing where the overlaps are with FOSIL and where I can really drill the FOSIL cycle, I came up with particular modules, and the first two are the names of the actual modules that I've come up with. So comprehending complex information texts and information analysis. These particular two, when I introduced this to the students, there was I chose these modules and the specific wording so that there was no confusion about what I'm expecting of them. Now, comprehending information text, I had to sit in a meeting with my head teacher and pitch that the reason why I've chosen information text is that I don't want to stick to fiction and because when SLTs saw that
Jannath,
module,
I'm sorry to
they
interrupt.
assumed what that meant
Jannath,
was taking accelerated reader quizzes, and I had to really, really. This is going to be about all and every type of information text as much. And then we go bottom three. What I have in the middle is inquiry-led prod year nines. It includes the modules at the top two, so the comprehension and the information analysis. And what this looks like is students partake in what I like to call a mini EPQ or mini FPQ, let's just say. I have not been able to get my school on board with bringing on the FPQ for many reasons. Firstly, it's because of staffing, that's the main reason. And also the number of students that we have in year nine as well. It will be it will be a workload issue if I were to be the only one assessing every single year nine research project. But what this does look like is year nines are asked to focus on one of two texts that they'll be studying in Key Stage 4 in English. So they'll be focusing on either Romeo and Juliet or The Empress. Now, they're not focusing on the plays itself, they're focusing on the context of the plays. And they are able to choose their own question. And I had created a booklet where it takes them through the inquiry process step by step. And one thing we focused on was the creation of questions and how to create a really good question. And we're at the stage now where I've just finalized every single student's question, and there are some fantastic ones, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with. And we have the final two on here, reading nonfiction for pleasure, and it's something that I focus on because at Connaught School for Girls, the students are, the data tells me that they're really, really good at reading for pleasure. However, I'd like to persuade them to read more nonfiction. And finally, we have SPAG, which is something again that we've not had a whole school approach, but now that this has been created, every single module that you see here has been shared with all staff. All the projects that I've done has been shared with all staff. And the assumption is that they take what they require for their own curriculum and they're able to use the same wordings. Now, the literacy criteria, it was a huge task to create. The literacy criteria, which I'll show you an example of in the next slide. When creating it, I poured and I went through every single possible skill I could find in the FOSIL skills breakdown Excel sheet. I created a teacher copy and a student copy, and I used the whole school success descriptors. The success descriptors are what we would tell students the level that they're at. So if it were Key Stage 4, it would be 1 to 9, but in Key Stage 3, we use specific phrases. Sorry. So for example, we have foundation, we have excelling, etc. Now, the challenges that I came across when creating the literacy criteria was, in fact, when I was going through the FOSIL skills breakdown, I found it quite difficult actually to differentiate the skills because I was using my whole school success descriptors. And I found it quite a skill that I would have in the secure level for students who are described as secure or assessed as secure. And I found it quite difficult to differentiate that for those who are at foundation level. So what I found myself doing is using the year 9 skills breakdown and having to go to maybe year 7 or year 6 even when it came to differentiating the skills. But when I went to the year 7 and year 6 skills breakdown, I also found it quite hard. The skill that matched, so it was trying to look for, I couldn't find. So I ended up actually creating my own with the students I have in mind. And I knew, for example, there are 10 SEN students who are in year 9. And I did this for year 7, 8, and 9 in mind, but I know that there are 10 students in year 9 that at the secure level, which is what I would hope everyone should be, at the secure level, they will not be able to get to that. They will not be able to understand how to execute that skill. So I had to create something where they are still working on that skill, but to their level. And I had to try and figure out what the wordings are for that. And I found that quite difficult. And that's a challenge that I came across. Another thing was that I had to use clear and accessible language for the student copy. And I found that quite difficult to do again. And finally, I needed to figure out, now that I've got this criteria, I needed to figure out how these skills will be assessed. What I've got up here is an example of what my descriptors look like. So this is the teacher copy, and I've just screen grabbed the excelling part of it. It's actually quite lengthy. But what I've done is, for some of them, I've just gone ahead and copied and pasted things off of the FOSIL Excel sheet. And you'll see in brackets at the end of the skill, I've got the number that correlates to the skill in the Excel sheet. So that members of staff, they can simply click on it and it will open up to that particular skill. And this is something that I show to all staff in the introduction to FOSIL, and I actually encourage them to have a look at these. And one of my intentions was that when they clicked on it, they'll have a lovely scroll and see things that catch their eye. And I really wanted this to be something that members of staff can look at. They have a project in mind. They can see exactly what skill they want their student to focus on. And they can go ahead and look for the skill. And I've gone ahead, and anytime I've created a resource that ticks off this particular skill within the criteria, then I've gone ahead and linked it in the resources section of the FOSIL sheet. And of course, I've created my own copy and I've added to the drive so it's accessible to everyone, which is something that I really needed to do. And here you have the student copy. And I wanted it to be active in the active sense, in that they are doing the skill and that they're able to tick off when they have done the particular skill. And I asked that all my students read this criteria, specifically the secure section, and that they go. And what I have done as well is I've printed it out, and it's in part of their booklets that I've created for them, and they are able to go back and forth whenever they see it. And I've also referenced it at the bottom of any slides that I show them, any resources that I show them, that when we are working on this particular skill, this is the explicit instruction part. I tell them exactly what skill, where in the criteria that they'll be able to tick this off. I wanted to share some resources that I have created and that students have filled in. One thing that I found was that I really wanted the active reading part to be emphasized with my students. This is from a Year 9 booklet, the Inquiry Project booklet that I created for Year 9s. And when I first taught this, I did like a test run with some members of staff, and they said there was going to be a lot of words to both plays. So I thought, why don't I go ahead and do a key where they can, where we go through the connect and we go through the wonder stage, and we use this key now regularly with any piece of text. Highlight anything that they are interested in, that they can relate to, and that they don't understand. And the amazing thing that I found from this was that when walking around, the multiple students highlight the same, and it could be vocab and it could be topics. Like, for example, this student here did social high, able to talk about that. If I had not done that, they would not have put their hand up to tell me that they don't understand, and it would have just been assumed that they knew what that meant. And it was also lovely to see students are very interested in what they are reading and what they're being taught in school. And it was lovely for them to have to look back on and see, when it came to creating their own question, to have a look back and see exactly what topics that they're interested in, and they could work from there. This is another sheet that I created where students were part of the wonder stage, wonder cycle, and I had asked them what their assumptions are and whether they can turn their assumptions into questions. They found this quite helpful to do, because they were asked to assume what the Empress is about before reading the text. So what Empress was about, what Romeo and Juliet is about. They were asked to list everything that they already know. But when turning it into questions, they could then actually go ahead and look it up. And these two particular students that I've shown here, they went ahead and did their own research about it, and they went ahead and asked their English teacher, and I felt like that was a personal win. Like the student on the right, she even added explain why, and I found that fantastic, because she really wanted to know the reason why. For example, how far do you agree that Romeo and Juliet is a toxic story? And she wanted to know the reason why it is a toxic story. And I found that fantastic. And I've also gone ahead and made it as easy as possible. I've used the resources from the skills breakdown list, the resources in the forums as well. And I've created my own checklist for students to come to their final topic and their final question. And I've used the the table that was in the resources section of FOSIL as well when it came to finding information. And the one thing, like I mentioned previously, I really focused on questions, and I really wanted to know the different types of questions, and I wanted to get them to understand that the way that you word a question very much assumes how you are going to go ahead with your research. This particular module I created for my year 7s and year 8s. We are doing a inquiry project into why conspiracy theories are so believable. And there was a conspiracy theory going around at the time that I thought students would be very well versed in, about everyone needing to thank Beyonce at awards. And if you don't thank Beyonce, then your career is basically diminished and gone. And they found that very interesting. We wanted to know whether that was true or not. And as you can see here, we looked into the Illuminati. That's a big conspiracy, and there's something that they could really relate to. And I used the key instead of the key being an additional thing, I added it to the worksheet and added space on the right hand side for them to write questions. So the idea was that I read aloud to them while they highlighted and wrote down. And I said, every single time that you are really, really enthused, you want to stop me and ask me a question, I want you to write it down instead. And for homework, they went ahead and tried to find the answers, try to encourage that independent learning. And on the left here, you see the yellow boxes where they are asked about things that they knew, things that they learnt. And at the bottom is really interesting. It says, my assumptions were challenged by. So previously I'd asked them what their assumptions were. And once they have read this particular text on the Illuminati, I wanted to know whether anything in the text challenged what they read, challenged what they had assumed. And for a lot of them they did, because they thought that they were just blood-sucking animals and, that they're taking over the world. And in fact, there was a true story to them, which was really interesting also to know. This is loading. Yep. What I've added here as well is, after the meeting, I had everything that I've shared with you here. I shared most of it with my members of staff, and then I went ahead and asked them how they can now include the literacy criteria in their own subject. And some of the things that they've written was amazing. Some of the things that I would never have thought of. And a lot of the members of staff actually asked me if we can work together to do these projects. So, for example, in geography, the geography head on, we have, for example, art and textiles. They want to show the objects with no context, leading to discussion. Then she said, slowly drip feeding context. What is the typing ideas? And it got me to think of inquiry within the lens of the teacher. Now we go ahead to the project summary. The things that I think went really well was that this is something that myself and Elizabeth also discussed, was that I would not have been able to do this without criteria. And I think that librarians should really, even whatever project that you're doing, if it's World Book Day, if it's for Reading for Pleasure, it's for SPAG, whatever it is, I think a criteria really helps you to know whether you've done well or not, and how you can assess whether they've done well or not, or whether you have met your own criteria even. I think the fact that these criteria in the curriculum is readily available, is along with the resources readily available for teachers. The fact that literacy inquiry is on the map now, it's amazing to hear members of staff just saying the cycle words. It brings such joy. And I've had follow-up conversations with the head of art and geography. The head of art used a lot of the same resources as me for the year 9 students, because she was taking her year 11 students to the museum. And what she wanted to do was actually, through our conversations, we decided that she will do the Connect and Wonder stage before she goes to the museum, and then have the museum as part of the investigation, which the students would be able to use in their final projects, which was also a fantastic idea. Now, here's some things that could be better. I really, really needed to learn how to talk like a teacher and how to use vocab like a teacher. As soon as I started saying the same words as members of staff, or even with my line managers, they understood exactly what I was seeking, what I needed. Using the same documents, the same performer, and the documents that other teaching staff use, I from after doing this project, I see myself as a middle manager. I see myself as somebody who teaches, even though I'm not a qualified teacher, but I view myself as someone like that. So I should use the exact same documents as everyone else, and now I do. It makes things so much easier. I had to understand how the assessment cycles work, and I was asked to create reports for my year eights, and they hadn't done assessments by then, so I didn't know what I was reporting on. And now that I know, I can now plan my curriculum based around the cycle, and it's based around the assessment cycle, so that I have something to report on. I need to understand how marking and feedback works. I wanted to do the exact same as what everyone else is doing. I also think that from here on out, I'll be leading by example, and I'll be tooting my own horn, and I'll be sharing my work with anyone and everyone who's willing to listen. And I think that is the only way to get terminology out there, to let it become part of the culture. And I also, this time round, for any new project, I think my advice will also be to discuss very explicitly with SLT line managers, whoever's involved, the change management. This was very big, and I don't think how I wanted it to be introduced to members of staff and the follow up didn't actually happen the way I wanted it to. And from hindsight, I would have liked to have been very explicit about how I would like to introduce FOSIL to members of staff, so that it actually creates a real impact. However, in order to counteract that, I will be from now, like I mentioned, just sharing my work whenever it's been done. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you so much. We had a little bit of difficulty with your internet, but I think we got the message, most of it, which is fabulous. If anybody does have any questions for Jannath, please pop them in the chat box. But I've got one while we're waiting. Are you planning to be a teacher, or are you going to stay as a school librarian? No, I don't. I think we might have lost.
So I'll be both. I'll be a teacher librarian, hopefully.
Fantastic. That's good. That was the right answer. You're going to be a teacher librarian. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's a little bit difficult. The other question that I've got is, and I'm not sure whether you can hear me or not, but is how do you manage to do this as well as all the library stuff? No.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I have been working very, very hard, is the honest answer. But I don't see this as separate to being a librarian. I see this as being a librarian. And I think that, again, that's just something that's changed within my own particular mindset. And I, especially with the booklets that I've created, so I've created one specific to each module. For each particular project that I'm doing with each year group, is that within the booklets that I've created, I have made sure that they have reading challenges in there that they have to do. They are getting set for homework, vocab and spag. I've included that in my resources, and and everything else, I just assume that what I'm doing is being a librarian. And when it comes to book ordering and make sure things are back on time and everything's overdue and things like that, I just have to squeeze it in. And I've got a wonderful member of staff who works 2 days a week, who does a very, very big amount of the work now. And again, that was something that I had to discuss before starting this, was that whether my other member of staff, part-time staff, would be happy to take on a larger role. And and everything's working smoothly so far.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I'm yeah, it's been lovely to hear how much you've managed to achieve in
Thank
such a short space of time. It is absolutely fabulous. Does anybody else have any other questions? I can't see any questions in the chat box, but what are we
you.
talking about? Does anybody else have any questions? We'll leave it for a second before we let you go. But we are heading towards another break, which will be good. Okay, it seems very quiet. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to see you again, and do keep in touch, Jannath.
Yes.
Happy to be involved in your next project.
Thank you.